Consciousness, yeah, consciousness. It's from consciousness, isn't it, I think? Consciousness. Shusness. Yeah, the con bit is with, isn't it? Like in chili con carne. Chili with meat. Consciousness is something with shusness, and shusness is knowing, which I personally would translate as something like sentience, a sensation, sensual engagement with the world, having a sensorimotor system that is capable of processing the data, sentience. And most animals have something like sentience. Anything with a sensorimotor system and a reasonably developed brain has got sentience. But I'm not sure any of them have got consciousness. Maybe some of them have. You know, certainly, yeah, I think quite a few of them have got some kind of consciousness, traces of it. And certainly something like monkeys, apes, chimpanzees, bonobos. And I've heard dolphins as well, actually, can kind of recognise themselves in a mirror, which I think is significant. So they don't have just shusness, they don't just have sentience, they have something with it. They have a sense of themselves in the world, even if it's a very kind of rudimentary representation. But we have this quite, by comparison, quite complex representation of ourselves in the world, which I guess is an ego, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing we point to and say I. Like that, I. Ego. So I think when we're saying consciousness, we're just kind of suppressing the I in that, you know, being kind of polite and using the passive voice. But I think the full sentence should be something like ego consciousness. Chili con carne, ego consciousness. Ego with sentience. You know, there's a centre to the world. You know what I mean? Lived experience has this person at the centre of it. We're constantly positing ourselves as the player in our own, you know, as the actor in our own play the whole time. You know what I mean? We're constantly centre stage, and we kind of know we are. And that's our ego at work, isn't it? That's the I that comes before the consciousness. And I'm guessing most animals don't have that. I think it's quite funny in that case. I mean, if this is true, I think it probably is. I think it's quite funny that a lot of spiritual practices and contemplative practices and meditative practices try to eradicate the ego. It's all about dissolving the ego and replacing the consciousness. So there's nothing for shusness to be with. There's no ego to go in front of the consciousness. So there's just the shusness. William James writes about shusness, and elsewhere I've heard it compared to the suchness that exists in some kind of Eastern spiritual writings. You know, so the aim, at least, of some contemplative and meditative practices, spiritual practices, unification with the divine, seems to be about getting rid of the ego, so there is nothing with shusness, there's just the shusness. Which is slightly odd, I think, because that's presumably the state that animals are in, isn't it? I would have thought, if they haven't got an ego, they've just got sentience, they've just got the shusness. Just seems a bit odd to me, because we often talk about, well, not often, I certainly don't, but some people talk about that kind of state, or that kind of pursuit, as related to the pursuit for the development of consciousness, or the evolution of consciousness, I've even heard it called, as if the next stage in the evolution of our consciousness will be found in this state of shusness, the state of sentience without an ego. But that's the state we've come out of, isn't it? I would have thought. I'm not saying that having an ego is great, it has its problems, but I don't know, I don't see why that would be a forward step. It sounds like a retrograde step, if anything. Yeah, chili consciousness, ego, chili consciousness, yeah. Yeah. Ego consciousness. There's a bit of wilderness I'm in right now. I don't know if you've got any of this on camera. There's the road there goes up to the college where I work. See that? And then they've built this weird kind of jetty here. A jetty, which overlooks nothing. Well, it overlooks wilderness. The other side of the road's a floodplain, so when the river floods it does fill it with water, and I guess this bit must flood sometimes. It suddenly turns into marsh at some times of the year, but right now it's just a kind of wilderness, which is kind of nice really, I suppose, if you're into nettles. Yeah. Look, they've made it all arty, look, they've given this like, whatever it is, withies I suppose, or cane or raffia or something. They've made this weird kind of spiral arch around it. Ooh, you are under my power. You're under the power of New Age hippies. Look. Ooh. It's great, love it. That's the floodplain over there.